Welcome to the Noah Presgrove case, the latest shocking breaking news, never talked about information, and previous points which have not been heard of or forgotten since. In recent time, an interview was done. Casey Smith, the mother to Noah Presgrove, has spoken up based on what they know, what they believe, what they've heard, etc. And a lot of it is really shocking and eye-opening. Today, I want to do an analysis and a reaction to what's gone down. The video is available on YouTube. You should be able to find it. It's about 35 minutes long. Yet in that 35-minute video, I picked up and listened to such interesting information which even I've not heard before. I don't think this requires resistance, because what's important to acknowledge, people in the background can talk about it or make references, but if they don't give the source, I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know where it came from originally, and that's probably why I may have not believed in certain stuff at a point in time. There needs to be clear communication to be able to understand it. That will make more sense later on, and I do need to give a disclaimer before we do start today. So just be patient and make sure to stick around, because you don't want to miss anything. With what's gone down in recent time, it could be game-changing, very shocking, very important, but language and wording is still most important. So for some people, these intense emotional moments and forms of movement, it might all seem good, or it might seem very hopeful, or it could seem very shocking, but it's important to maintain a level, or at least try to maintain a level of stability, not a game of who's right, who's wrong, okay? It should make more sense later. Anyway, welcome if you're currently here during the live premiere. Share your thoughts, opinions in the live chat box on the right side of the screen. And at any point or time, if you have comments, questions, answers, thoughts or theories you want to add on, you're welcome to drop your comments below under the video, because it will help with spreading awareness and starting new discussions. If you want to support my channel, there are pinned messages linked down below. If you want to watch my recent videos on the Noah Presgrove case, the full playlist, and anything else in between, like Kenny Veach, that will all be available top right corner where the eye symbol is up there. What I also want to say is, apologies if there is any interruptions today, like if I cough. Unfortunately, I am ill once again. And in terms of the coughing and the tickliness, it's almost identical to last time. So it's been continuous disruption for over 100 days. So talk about getting screwed over amongst other things going on in life, typical. Nevertheless, this needs to be covered today. It needs to be analysed and looked into before people go off the deep end and misunderstand certain points. There's a lot to take into consideration. This could expand onto future videos or a map analysis if need be, even if it's a theory-based one, because I've already done that elsewhere. So we just go with it, a steady flow. I do have bullet points in front of me just to use as guidance, along with some quotes, some word for word too, where it's most important. Without further ado, if we begin, the conversation started introducing one another in the interview, a guy, the YouTube channel, a new upcoming channel from the looks of it, and interviewing Casey Smith. And one thing that was mentioned first of all is that truck driver found Noah Presgrove's body. Technically that's correct. I just found that interesting. A truck driver. What about the second guy? You had Tyler Hoodman, the first one, who was, I think, was it semi-truck? And that was at 5:43, called in to police dispatch. Then at 5:53, the successful call, the third one, you had Tyler Hardy. Now, out of those two guys, who were they referring to in this interview that a truck driver found Noah's body, when it was actually two drivers that found Noah's body? It's just a little counterpoint, just a heads up. Based on what we've heard and what's been stated, there was two guys, not one. I want to know your thoughts and input as we do go through this. There might be the odd contradiction as well, or there could be slight misinterpretation. That's why I'm here to try and manage things, right? Now, next point that was mentioned, Casey Smith. Noah Presgrove was on and off at the party. What that basically means is, when the party was starting on a Friday, which we never hear much about, more so Saturday onwards when Noah did attend. Noah was there Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but he wasn't there 24/7. He came, he left. When it came to Saturday, he was in his own vehicle. When it came to Sunday, as in the morning time, he was still in his own vehicle because he was at the party. But then after breakfast, a bit later on, he left, he went back home supposedly, spent some time with his girlfriend who wasn't attending the party supposedly. Whilst he was at home, where he was living at the time with his grandmother, I think. Who's she called? Was it Deborah Smith? Maybe. Noah had a wash, which could have led to some of the writing being washed off his body. He also slept, probably got some food too. And then later on, Sunday, afternoon, evening, ended up being picked up, and to the party he returned, and then Monday staying there, and then after being found dead. So Sunday afternoon onwards, when Noah made it back to the party, he was no longer in his own vehicle, so it made it harder for him to get about from place to place. Okay? So that's just a bit more context behind what Casey was getting at, coming and going. But one thing that was very interesting, and I might pronounce it wrong, just as a heads up, Casey Smith said that in regard to Noah Presgrove, he was left at the Sonic in Morecambe. Is that how you say it? Morecambe? Got picked up by somebody, then took to the party that night. We never really knew of the true timing as to when Noah left and went to that party, returned back. People just said the afternoon onwards, so it was pretty vague. But in regard to Noah getting picked up by somebody, Casey doesn't seem to know who that somebody is. Well, what Justin Roy has stated in the past, it was an individual known as Gage Jessen, and it was Jack Newton that contacted Gage and got him to pick Noah up. But in the process of Noah being picked up by Gage Jessen, Mikey Lair was also picked up too. So Mikey and Noah were in the same vehicle heading down to the party. And for Mikey Lair, on the Sunday, it was his first time attending that party at that house and location. But the details that stand out to me, which I've never heard of before, is that Noah was left at the Sonic. Now, I think I've heard of that before, Sonic. Could be wrong. Is it to do with fast food? Maybe. Morricone? Not heard of that location before. Maybe we do a map analysis at some point. See, I was under the interpretation originally that Noah Presgrove was at his place of living, at his home. Jack made the call about, come on, come back to the party. Noah was convinced and said, okay then. And then Noah was simply waiting around at his property, at his house, until Gage showed up at the driveway and picked him up. But that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like Noah was already at a different location. Maybe he was just grabbing food before he was going to get picked up to go down to the party. But if you're going down to the party to a different house, wouldn't there be food available there? Why not grab food when you get to the house? Maybe because it's the afternoon, evening time, having lunch, having late lunch. That is a possibility. But the wording, Noah was left at the Sonic, what does that actually mean? Because when we talk about Sunday morning and after breakfast, Noah was in his own vehicle and he drove back to his place of living. He made that choice himself. He was in control and behind the wheel. For Casey to say on that day, at some point, Noah was left at Sonic, it implies before he got a lift to the party, he was getting a lift by somebody else and was dropped off at Sonic, possibly. Or Noah was tagging along with someone or some people and they left him at that building until Noah was picked up by someone that had a car. what's that all about? I know it's not like a direct build up to Noah's death, but it's a little detail along the way which has never been mentioned before, to my knowledge. Why is it only being mentioned or highlighted clearly now? Some people in the background could say, it was said before, it was mentioned in the past. Well, that could be said about a lot of stuff, but let me make one thing clear. When I've done coverage on these themes, topics, and events, I've not seen anyone bring up those specific details which these people claim to have already known or seen in the past. Maybe because people forget, or selective memory mindset. Well, I'll include this detail, but I won't bother including that one. How am I supposed to know? There's not that consistency. That's why I tend to bring things up over and over again, because there could always be somebody new that just doesn't know. Let me know your thoughts though. Noah left at Sonic in Moroccan, and then got picked up by Gage Jessen, supposedly, to go down to the party. Beside that, the interviewer mentioned there's about 40 to 50 party goers. Based on the reaction by Casey, she was basically saying, yeah. Not really contesting the claim. So supposedly, as a fact, there was 40 to 50 party goers in total, added up over the course of the 3 to 4 days of the partying taking place, meaning people were coming and going, some remained and others were only there maybe for 1 or 2 days and never returned back, but that total accumulation at the end of the day totaled that said number. Which is around like what Caden Pressey had said and some other people, though with Caden, he was wording it that there was around that amount on one day, whether that be Sunday onwards or if that be Friday, depending what interview you listen to. Yes, some inconsistencies there, and I haven't forgotten. Beside agreeing, Casey saying, 40 to 50 party goers, she said the majority of them were underage, which I guess probably the case. I mean, in terms of the people that I can remember at 18 or over, it have been Noah, Caden, Jack, Carter Combs, Avery. There might have been a few more people, but that's just off the top of my head. But then you had supposedly some people that were 15 or 14 or 16. Some people said it was done in sensationalism, exaggerated the low age ranges to drive more shock and value to the case and push the whole social drinking laws and all of that. Social hosting, depends how you look at it. But yeah, there's some details which we've heard of before. But it does get interesting because Casey Smith did say, roughly in quotes, we had that petition going on. By Casey saying we implies that she's working alongside it or at least supports the petition. The petition being the original one which Michael Faizkaz was behind and was pushing it online for people to sign. And as we know, not all the family members agreed to it. Ashley Chadwick and Robin Smith were cautious about it and didn't want it to be done or followed through with or posted or made public because they thought it could cause issues within the case. Was it double jeopardy or something like that? A slap on the wrist for those responsible, and it harms the case so it doesn't get full justice. So certain victims' family members were a little cautious and worried as to, would it impact the case? Would it lead to a lack of justice? So you can understand people taking it cautiously. Some months ago, we did see Robin Smith calling out Michael Faizkaz in a really negative way, talking about harassment, not listening, pushing and forcing his way in. However, there are other family members of Noah Presgrove, the Presgrove family, that do support the supposed petition. I believe Dalen, the brother, Madison Rawlings, the sister to Noah, support the petition and signed it. And from the looks of it, Casey Smith, the mother to Noah, as well. That speaks volume, but it also shows that there is a divide within the Presgrove family. So depending which members of the Presgrove family speak out public, it could be dominated and one-sided, and it could come across as the family in general don't approve of the petition. But the reality is, from what's been said, it's simply divided. Some family members don't agree with it, and others do support it. There's a division. It's not just the community where there's a division, but within the victim's family. So it shows how deep and how significant it really is. And that's why confusion can go on at times, depending on who you listen to and who speaks the loudest and the most. As for Casey, she's not spoken up as much due to, I guess, the situations, everything that's going on, past and present. It's difficult to do so. So when you don't have prominent people talking and others step up or take over, the narrative will be more narrow and possibly linear. It's unfortunate. Beside that, Casey believes that, in quotes, once underage drinkers get prosecuted or can be prosecuted, I think we're going to get more to this story. She thinks that they will speak out. With college upcoming and for some of the younger party goers, they don't want that on their record or dragging their life down. So get it out of the way now, speak up, do what needs to be done. Hasn't happened just yet, but she believes that things can come about once people are prosecuted. If that's linked more so to the defendants on the wrongful death lawsuit, I guess time will tell. But there is a possibility that with what Casey believes or thinks, as in who could be responsible, maybe not all the names tie in or apply to what's been mentioned on the wrongful death lawsuit. So it's worth taking that into consideration. But as I said, her language and wording is, I think. She thinks, not that she knows with absolute confidence, not that it's a fact, it's more an opinion. And I did say as a disclaimer today, what's said by Casey, to us, and only us, the viewers, the audience, it could come across as hearsay just because it's words and someone's telling us this and that. We're not seeing the hard evidence ourselves, but she herself may have done from seeing photos, videos, people reaching out to her. When you have the evidence or you're the witness to evidence and then you have to pass it on to the general public, but you can't show the physical evidence or the hard evidence, you've got to take their word for it and believe. So some can twist it or interpret it as, well, it's just hearsay. So just so people don't fall off the deep end, I just wanted to mention that right now. Anyway, Casey Smith, and this is an important point, very important. She says, I believe the petition should continue on. So it shows that she is in full support of Michael Faceca's petition, even though in the past there's been some stronger opinions against it from other family members. But Casey did say in that interview, she is aware not all of the family approve or agree of it. Casey Smith mentioned, but she doesn't follow much of the news articles or media online to do with Noah Presgrove due to the pain. Because it is a reminder. Whilst it's in your head and it's quite active and raw, what you're going through, what you've lost, and how you come out of it the other end, in some ways worse off, maybe more so mentally, it can leave scars behind, memories, flashbacks in many different ways. Even if you weren't directly physically there to see it happen, to witness it, but to hear that news, something you thought you'd never hear to see in your lifetime, ends up happening, it can have maybe forms of PTSD in certain ways. Not just with possible party goers who were there firsthand, but externally. Those that are connected to Noah closely, more so by blood, those that care about Noah truly, and they have to hear that news. It can be a massive shock. It can knock you back. Then when it comes to hearing the details of the report, the autopsy, and anything else in between, the more brutal, the more in-depth the details are, like with the damage reports and what Noah could have gone through, it makes it even more upsetting and unbearable to listen to. And you might have to go through it. You may have no choice. You might need to, just in the moment, to try and process, to get some closure or to understand to some extent, because as bad as an event is, and as much as you're suffering, at the same time, you want to know, you want answers, end game answers, or just in the moment, what's happened? What do people know? What's going on? What does the report say? What's going to happen next? What do we do? Once you get past that stage and it's still ongoing, there probably is a numbing phase, whether that be down to indirect or direct from PTSD, flight mechanic, running away, numbing yourself, backing down, shutting off, cutting things out of your life, hiding away, mentally, physically, or both, to protect yourself. You care, but you're also trying to protect yourself so you don't suffer anymore. It's a very complex time. Not that it applies here, but then again it could. And let me just give you a very quick example. When it came to the first anniversary of Noah's passing, and the family, the Presgrove, did their own thing privately in their own ways, they didn't make a big song and dance. They didn't spread it online either. And maybe other people do. Everyone's different. Everyone reacts different, but some of the audiences, people online on Facebook, assumed and thought, well, why aren't the family talking more, honouring the anniversary louder? Is it because they don't care? You know, us randoms care more because we've done more and we've said more. What are they doing? You remember that time with the army page and with what some said? Was it Tiffany Shepherd, maybe Vanessa Salazar and some other people? Yeah. It put some people's backs up real tight on the justice page. The Presgrove family did speak out, from Victor Presgrove to some extent Madison Rawlings to, I think, Ashley Chadwick, maybe a bit of Robin Smith as well. Quite intense. But what I'm saying is, with that example and others, and even with Casey, not looking at the news, not looking online, keeping away from it, hiding from it to some extent, because they know what's up, they know what's what, and it's too upsetting to learn to listen to it, because they've already replayed it enough in their head already, that if there was any more details or information, there's not enough space to handle it or to process it because they're overwhelmed. Whether they've got PTSD or not, just overwhelmed by emotion, overly stimulated in different ways. It can just lead to the body outright shutting off, the mind disassociating, disconnecting from other people, from certain communities, online, in real life, in many different ways. So Casey did what she did to, I guess, protect herself while still internally feeling everything and thinking of people still. You can shut off, you can disappear. To other people, it looks as if you don't care. You've abandoned them. You don't care anymore. But deep down, you do. But you're also dealing with your own stuff. Very complex, very difficult on that said person, but also very difficult on the people on the outside who are left in the dark and don't know what's happening, which leads to misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and why some people were rushing and attacking the family for the 1-year anniversary for how they honoured Noah privately. There was a misunderstanding. The family did what they did in their own way, in their own time, such as behind closed doors. It worked for them, it was needed, you know? When there's that understanding and perspective, it can ease things slightly. Doesn't get rid of the problem, but it can ease it just a little bit. So I know that's quite deep, but I'm also just adding in links and stuff from the past just so you remember as well. Okay? With that being said, next point mentioned by Kay Smith was during the wake of Noah Presgrove, when Jack was present, she asked Jack what happened to Noah. Casey responded in the interview and mentioned, well, Jack Newton said, I don't know. Noah Presgrove was teabagging me about 1:30 in the morning, saying, take me home, take me home. 1:30 in the morning, as in Monday. There are certain words, names, or details throughout the interview which Casey doesn't make quite clear. Sometimes it's based on common sense, other times just interpreting it. So I did add in the odd word to make sense of it. So at 1:30 in the morning, Noah Presgrove was supposedly teabagging, which is strange. Casey did say that Jack Newton responded to Noah's need of wanting to be taken home, and Jack said to Noah at the time, no, and that's when Noah Presgrove took off. That makes no sense in general. Casey added on saying, well, Jack Newton's story has changed since, which appears to be the case. Casey also mentioned that, in her words, I do believe Jack Newton knows what happened. I do believe Caleb Newton, the father to Jack, was part of it, and they had something going on between them, as in with the outcome of Noah. Quite shocking, that. But if we just work back a little bit, from what Robin Smith and Ashley Chadwick said in the last and final Partners in True Crime interview on the Noah Presgrove case back in 2024, it was mentioned by Ashley and Robin that Jack Newton originally said to Victor Presgrove, the father to Noah, that Jack and his girlfriend Carter Combs went to bed at 11:30 p.m. Sunday night. That story changed. Robin and Ashley, etc., were told by Jack, or heard about it somewhere or another, that it was 1 in the morning instead when Jack went to sleep. But then the story changed again at a later point when Jack supposedly said, no, it was 2 in the morning when he went to sleep. Some have suggested that the final photo of Noah in the bathroom at 1:50 supposedly a.m. Monday morning is what triggered Jack to change his story. Because if Jack originally claimed he went to sleep at 1 in the morning and then 50 minutes later there is a photo of them two together awake in the bathroom, kind of contradicts Jack's story. So then he changed it to 2 in the morning. That's how people have interpreted it online. Times have changed, and people have said it's a big deal. It's quite drastic. Yeah, I agree. Discrepancies are a big deal. Inconsistencies are a big deal. Like with anything in life, you want stability. You want reassurance. You want to know what's up and what's happening and where someone is, depending on the situation. You need consistency. You don't want lies, you don't want too many contradictions, and you definitely don't want discrepancies, because if you do have that, then there's no stability, there's no security, and you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to believe in, and you might feel lost. And that is universal for many different situations in life. When dealing with a life or death situation, or post-death, it's very important to know the real facts, and you'd hope that's possible from real witnesses or people of interest. When that becomes dysfunctional, you lose hope, and it can create stress. It can create more problems than what was already going on. So, whilst that's important to highlight with Jack, let's never forget Caden Pressey and his discrepancies. Shocking and apparent. I've documented it on my channel, like how I've done with Jack. It's not just one-sided, it applies to other partygoers, whether they do it with intent or by accident. Discrepancies, contradictions, memory loss, changes can happen. It's not always done with intent. But of course, when you're dealing with it without context or limited, you might think the worst at times. It's just how it is. So if people go all in on Caden, they should go all in on Jack and anyone else that is inconsistent, and vice versa. But the reason why it's important this is because of the action that supposedly was going on. You could rule it all out and say all of it is meaningless because, as Casey said, Jack has changed his story since. So what was originally stated isn't true. So does that mean that teabagging in general never happened whatsoever? Because it has been mentioned by some people in the community. The timing of it, though, differs to what Casey said here with what Jack originally stated. Jack said it happened at 1:30 in the morning. That doesn't say whether Jack was asleep or not, though. Noah could be teabagging Jack, but what was Jack doing at that time? Casey didn't make clear. I guess you can assume and say, based on what was said afterwards by Casey, as in Jack's changed his story and the whole sleeping thing was countered by Caden Pressey and his testimony and all that. At the end of the day, you could interpret it that if Jack was awake at 1:30, then likely Noah wasn't teabagging Jack at that time, because most of the time you wouldn't be consciously awake and let somebody squat on you and rest what's in between the legs dangling upon your head, face, eyes, wherever. Most of the time, you're not going to allow that to happen. We don't need to do a demonstration either. When it comes to teabagging, it's basically more so the act of a male doing it to maybe another male or anyone really, even though it's questionable. But likely the lower area is exposed, and what dangles in between, a pair of them, will be slapped or pressed against the face, the body of someone who's not expecting it, maybe as a prank or a joke. May tend to happen more so when a person is asleep. So based on that interpretation, when the said event happened at 1:30, Jack was asleep. So if the quote is from what Jack mentioned, that Noah saying, take me home, take me home. What, Noah was teabagging Jack's face unclothed whilst also saying, take me home, take me home. The mental images of that when looking up at it. But supposedly that never happened based on the stories changing. But I said the other people out there have said teabagging took place when Noah did it to several people when they were asleep, no names given. And that was after the side-by-side rollover, more so after the shower. Noah got out of the shower at what time? Well, definitely past 2 in the morning, at least. Around or after 3 in the morning, maybe. And yeah, Noah just teabagging people with no clothes on. We kind of interpreted it in the past that, well, did the teabagging lead to a prank gone wrong? Someone took it the wrong way and got revenge on Noah because they felt humiliated? Who knows? Just interesting that the teabagging mention was, highlighted and acknowledged. And it's interesting that Jack Newton brought it up originally in the first place, and the timing of it greatly differs to what we've heard since. So Jack says it happened at 1:30. Other people in the community who you could consider on the dark side have said it occurred past 2 in the morning, 2:30 onwards. Big time difference discrepancy. What the hell's going on there, right? But it's interesting that Noah wanted to be taken home at that said time originally, and Jack denied Noah that. I guess because it's that early in the morning and Jack being sleepy. It's understandable, okay? Your friend or someone you know wants something or a favour. You might do it other times, but because of the timing of this, it's just not practical. You could interpret it like that, maybe. Yeah. But if any of that was true, for Jack to say, then Noah took off, that doesn't make sense. But then again, it depends what it means by took off. Does that mean took off from the house to never be seen again when he walked away? Or did took off mean he just left the bedroom where Jack was sleeping and continued on at the party doing other stuff? It's not quite made clear, is it? Jack did say that Noah walked off around 3:30. If Jack also said Noah took off around 1:30, what the hell does that mean? You could interpret it as, in an alternative way, that Noah Presgrove walked off multiple times from the party house. And based on what other people had said, based on Caden Pressey, when he said he was told by Jasmine Millan that Noah walked away between 2 to 3 in the morning. And Jack at a later point said Noah walked away at 3:30. It's like, how many times did Noah really walk off? And then you had, was it Sarah Smith? Is that her last name? Sarah, the sister to Stevie Howard, that claimed to Jasmine on Facebook saying, oh yeah, and you, Jasmine, and you lot were aware that Noah walked away from the party the night before when you went out and found him and brought him back to the house. So what, 3-4 times Noah walked away from the party house? What the hell's going on there? Seems a bit unusual in a way. Let me know if you agree or not. But yeah. So I'm just looking at the notes in case you're wondering the eye contact. There was a lot mentioned in the 35-minute video. It's quite shocking in a way. So yeah, Casey believes that Jack Newton knows what happened and Caleb Newton was part of it. To know what happened doesn't always mean you're directly involved. You may have been an overseer, you might have been a witness, you might have been a part of the audience, or you may have even been told about it by the perpetrator and you're keeping it a secret to protect yourself or to protect that perpetrator because you are connected with them, maybe in an emotionally biased way. It's important to highlight that it's what Casey believes, with a level of confidence, but not as an absolute fact. Still an opinion, but a stronger opinion on what she really thinks is the case. Over time, people have believed that Jack is responsible. It's been pushed a lot online, even Caleb's name thrown about in the mix. Just so happens those two names do come up in the wrongful death lawsuit, so there's a bit of consistency there. I'm aware, just people in general online pushing it about Jack and Caleb being responsible or knowing something. I think most of people online were pushing it more that they were directly involved, more physically, whereas Casey believes that they at least know something did happen, at least. Maybe what they saw, what they heard, what was said to them. It is interesting though with Caleb because he was supposedly not at the party until he got to the highway, and that was post-death news of Noah when Jack contacted his father at 6:05 in the morning. So did Caleb simply cover for Jack or cover for Jack on behalf of somebody else? If you're there in the moment when the death happens or nearby, there's high chances that you could be more a part of it. If you're nowhere near the area when it happens, the chances of being fully involved are lower, but the chances of being somewhat involved are still present because you might have been told the truth. Someone may have confessed to you afterwards, along the lines of that. So it's interesting what Casey believes. So if Casey believes that Jack and Caleb are a part of it, there must be foul play, basically, in the case. Casey Smith mentioned that she believes due to the theme of underage sexual activities, the theme of jealousy did come into play around Noah's death. What, directly because Noah was interacting with another party girl, another girl, whether that girl had a boyfriend or not at the party, and other people got jealous because of that or defensive, and it escalated or spiraled out of control. And the presence of alcohol always can intensify the situation, can turn neutral people into somewhat aggressive, uncontrollable ones that act out, that are more agitated, that are more defensive, more verbally charged energy, then eventually leading into a form of physicality. You could highlight that possibility. You let me know in the comment section if you agree with the theme of jealousy, underage sexual activities. At the end of the day, whether it was underage or not, if there's activity, intimacy going on at a party, there can still be jealousy. If there's intimacy going on at the party, there could still be people getting screwed over, not literally, as in if there was any cheating going on. Because from what Caden Pressey said, that Noah was yelling at Jack Saturday night going into Sunday morning past midnight because supposedly Jack was flirting with Noah's girlfriend. Noah's girlfriend not being at the party, but somehow flirting, and Noah found out and wasn't too happy. That's what Caden said. Jack worded it as they both argued over girl trouble and both apologised afterwards, splitting the blame. A few people online ever since in the chats on YouTube have claimed Caden made it up about the situation of the argument. And also the backstory behind the argument was more so driven by supposedly Jack spending more time with his girlfriend, best friend Noah feeling left out and neglected, so it led to a form of resistance or conflict. And, you know, just the general theme of that, it's understandable how an argument can take place because of that, and it can still escalate. Sometimes when you care too much, it can hurt much more. Sometimes when you're closer to someone, there can be more arguments, there can be more fighting. But it's not always a negative, toxic thing, that. It can still be a positive. Fighting for something, fighting for someone, trying to scratch and claw to maintain a hold of a relationship or a friendship when it feels like it's slipping away and fading. There's only so much that you can do. It should be for the other person on the other end to do their part. But sometimes they don't. Other times they don't think. All that strain, all that pressure, all that responsibility falls on one person. The one that feels like they're missing out, being left out, and even frozen and isolated. A balancing, juggling act, even for the other person that's meeting others with time. So if at the party there was an argument to do with girl trouble, an overall theme, but a deeper undertone was Noah felt Jack was fading away because Jack was moving on with other people, that could hurt Noah, feeling betrayed, feeling forgotten, feeling neglected. If you're closer to someone and it feels like they're pulling away, it's going to hurt. It might cause frustration. It can cause a variety of feelings and reactions. And for each person, the reaction can be different. The intensity can be different as well. So if that's the motive behind the argument, it could still be justified and it could still be the overall motive behind it all, pretty much. So that's worth taking into consideration. What else do we have? Casey Smith, she read Caden Pressey's confession from Facebook, possibly. I say possibly from Facebook because Caden did make it known on there about a bit of his backstory and the party. He did also talk in Partners in True Crime as well, but I don't know if Casey listened in to that. I don't know if you call it a confession or more so a testimony or a witness report, a story time, who knows. Normally when you say confession, it could be more interpreted along the lines of, oh, this person is responsible, the guilt's got to them, and now they're confessing the real truth behind what they've done or behind what they know whilst they've been covering it up. So I don't think maybe the correct wording was used by Casey there because it makes Caden Pressey look bad. But obviously Caden is not mentioned at this moment on the wrongful death lawsuit, so it doesn't really matter. What you've also got to consider as well on the sideline, Casey Smith's language and wording may not be perfect. It's not perfect with really anyone in this world. It's not perfect with me either. But under the situations, the strains and the struggles and the psychological aspect with her, with dealing with son's death, it dragging on, the lack of closure, the stress and all of that, and dealing with being in a dark place and where they're currently at AA meetings, so I guess drinking problems, there's a lot that they're dealing with. The pressures of trying to get better, the pressures and feelings of possible regret where it can eat you away, maybe overthinking as well. When there's a lot going on, you might not show up all the time. When there's a lot going on, how you talk and communicate may not be as clear as other times where things were a bit lighter. So I'm not excusing Casey Smith in terms of like if there was lots of discrepancies or lots of inaccuracies. I'm just saying that they might be doing the best that they can, but how they express themselves, the words that come out, aren't always what they were thinking or feeling at the time inside, if that makes sense. So in regard to at least what Caden Pressey was originally talking about, what we've seen as well, I don't think Casey was acknowledging the police report, the police interview one, where that was leaked. That didn't get mentioned in the interview with Casey, but I believe Casey was summarising what Caden Pressey was saying in her own words. I'll clear it up if need be. But in quotes, Casey was saying, oh, and then you had Jack Newton that ran to the party house and told everybody Noah Presgrove is dead. Then you got Jack, who also runs out of the property, the house, and everybody knew where to run, as in the highway. Then everybody came back into the house and went to sleep. In terms of how that's worded, and it's not me being awkward, it's just me being realistic, or at least from what's been stated by Caden Pressey. If we're basing it off Caden Pressey, roughly word for word, Jack Newton bursted through, the door banged. It woke Caden Pressey up, but it didn't wake the other guys up, like Mikey, Brylan and Isaac, who were supposedly asleep. Caden had to physically wake them up. Jack announced Noah's dead. May have referred to the highway, likely, for those other partygoers to know where to go. Jack quickly left and went back to the highway. Caden Pressey spent 2 to 5 minutes trying to find his other shoe, which turned out to be on Noah, which was unknown to Caden at the time. In the end, Caden, Brylan, Isaac, Mikey drove down to the highway, based on what Caden Pressey originally said. All this occurring around 5:15, arriving at the highway at about 5:21, and then leaving at 5:30 when told to by a bearded, short, stubby truck driver or guy that was in a high-vis jacket, who could have turned out to be Cash Alsop, but it's not guaranteed. That's just an extended observation. And when the four, Caden, Brylan, Mikey, Isaac, returned back to the party house, they went to sleep. Caden stayed up, watched TV. Around that time and a bit before, the girls who were at the party still, like Logan, Carter, Jasmine, Avery, I'm not sure if there's any other girls, were crying in the kitchen area and just sticking together. The girls did not go down to the highway. Only Brylan, Mikey, Isaac, and Caden did, based on Caden Pressey's claims and how he's told the story with time. So basically when Casey says everybody did this and everybody went to the highway, that's not true. That's an exaggeration. That is reckless language used, but I'm not being critical in a negative way towards Casey, okay? Because I understand the situation. You use loose language when you haven't got time to think. When there's a lot going on, you just say what you say and what you can say in the moment. It's understandable. But just to set the record straight so people don't get misled or confused, it was only 4 guys that went to the highway and Jack was already there, making it 5. And then at least 2 other guys, the truckers, or a truck driver and somebody else. Enough people present. So, yeah. But in terms of coming back and sleeping, Casey said, you're not going to go to sleep in any trauma situation like that. Maybe if you're a psychopath or you haven't got much emotion or feeling, you might be able to sleep and have a good night's rest. But not everyone's like that. And as for those partygoers, it's hard to believe that they would be able to do that. One thing that counters the whole going to sleep thing in a way is the timing. because there was a Snapchat hard evidence that showed visually at 5:27 in the morning, Mikey Lair, one of the guys that was with Caden at the highway, was actually in bed, awake, smiling with Jasmine and Logan in one of the bedrooms of the party house. Yeah, it's a problem, isn't it? And it's not really been countered since. So you could take away the aspect of going back to sleep after the traumatic news because they didn't go to sleep in the first place because they hadn't heard of the news just yet. But when they eventually did hear of the news, it was too late on in the day to go to sleep and it wasn't possible. Maybe you could interpret it like that. But I do understand, just based on Caden's original statement, Casey Smith does have a point. Whether you physically see it, or even if you just hear about it, and it's connected to you in some way. You don't have to physically be there to see it, to hear it. It can affect you regardless. Maybe more so if you're connected to that said individual that had died or got hurt. But if you're not emotionally connected to someone and you've got no ties with a said person, but you see it visually in the moment, in real life, that can have a great profound effect on you negatively. It can range from an animal to a human, to a young person, to an older person, a complete stranger. Could, not to sound rude, could be considered a nobody, yet you see them, maybe dead, really injured. That can scar you. That can cause like long memories and flashbacks. If it's something so shocking or disturbing, something so unimaginable, it can leave a lasting mental imprint on you. Daydreaming, but not literal dreams, more nightmares. Going to sleep, closing your eyes, and all you see is Noah Presgrove, for example, on the highway. Not that that's what's happened to partygoers and that effect or that severity, but it can. Whether that be linked to PTSD or not. You can get it with positive events and moments in life as well, where something's so positive and magical, you can't believe that it's real or it exists. You close your eyes and you see it, the mental image, and it's so amazing. Whether that's to do with an event or a person you know of, but it can happen with the darkness as well, and maybe more so it's associated with darkness. If you think, especially when it's raw in the moment, and a trauma event, a trauma response, body, defense mechanisms, how could you possibly go to sleep? Whether you close your eyes and you still see it, the body, the person, the pain, you hear the sounds, it's not good. But if you don't visualize it as a mental image, you might just feel it within. Kind of like if you're friends with someone or you're in a relationship with a person and out of nowhere something changes, snaps, breaks down. It's so abrupt, it's so unexpected, it shocks you. That in itself is a wave of feeling shocked. The inability to do stuff, to function, to even sleep, go through different stages. It could even be considered a form of grief. Either losing someone literally or losing someone who you thought you had a future with. It can knock you back, it can set you down, it can put you in a lower mood, it can impact many different areas from low appetite, not eating as much, not drinking as much, then that can have a knock-on effect to how you sleep, your sleep patterns. It can be a very vicious cycle, short-term, intense, long-term, intense, and anything in between. But when it's raw and in the moment, especially, that's when it can be very difficult to do what you would normally do with certain routines, like going to sleep. It's really early in the morning, or at least you need your sleep, you know you do, but how can you possibly rest when you're at an unrest? You haven't got the closure, you haven't got the clarity, you've just found out someone that you're very close to is no longer alive. There's no way you could go to sleep. unless they tried going to sleep as a distraction and they were resting, but they weren't truly asleep. Now, Caden Pressey said he was just sat down watching TV. Other people out there have interpreted that negatively and said, well, that's bad. You should be worrying about Noah and all that. Everybody reacts differently. The act of watching TV is just simply a distraction from what's going on, trying to escape from reality, a form of escapism in the moment. Even long-term, humans will use certain actions, make use of certain things as a form of escapism in healthy ways, but also in unhealthy ways without moderation, such as jobs and work. People may overwork themselves because they just can't face what they would have to deal with if they had that time and free time to just sit and think. Because when they've got that time to sit and think, it's detrimental to them and it's just horrible. So they need to keep busy without dealing with the problem directly at hand. For the person that's going through it at the time, seems impossible. For a person on the outside looking in, it can seem easy just to say, well, do this and do that and change this and change that. It's just not always possible. As deep as that is, you can see how deep it runs and how bad it can be. Raw in the moment, doesn't seem likely that people could sleep. The Kenny Veach case, missing person, lack of proactivity, lack of memorial online, lack of comments, lack of press conferences, interviews and all that, maybe because some of the family members didn't need to worry because they knew that Kenny was okay, but online and in public it was just perceived as they were missing. When people know more details or context, there may not be a reason or need to worry or show tears or remorse or feel guilty or struggle. If you have the answers, you may struggle less, depending on the context. And how the event is presented outwards may differ to how and what people know of on the inside. In regard to the Noah Presgrove case, Noah was dead. Bottom line. There's no other way around it. Noah ended up dead. And whether people are involved or not and innocent, it can affect people in different ways. I might be wrong, but I have a feeling that if any partygoers were involved in Noah's death, most of them probably don't have a history of doing things like that. Could be wrong. But, in some ways, if it's a first-time thing, something negative, you still do it. It's not good, but it could still impact you. It depends how you look at it, right? Anyway, Casey Smith added on, saying about how, well, with Jack Newton up past 1:30 in the morning, so he lied to me. That's in regard to what Caden Pressey was claiming at around 5:15 when Jack bursted through the door. Well, if Jack bursted through the door at that time, then 1:30 must have been a lie. Two completely different times. But if you used to say, well, Jack was asleep at 1:30 or went back to sleep at 1:30 after denying Noah a ride back home, then 5:15 Jack's awake, then that must mean he wasn't asleep in the first place. There's still always that possibility that Jack drifted off to sleep or rested but didn't truly sleep in that sense. And poor wording has been used with time, and people have interpreted a certain time with when a person was truly asleep, but they weren't truly asleep, they were just resting or sat down, eyes closed or not. You get what I'm saying? It's like how Caden Pressey interpreted it, that when he went to sleep at 2 in the morning, Mikey was on the floor, asleep or more so resting. But from some kind of footage what we've seen, where supposedly Mikey is underneath a traffic barrel, reflective barrel, outside the property of the party house with Pepe Guam on camera. That was at 2:32. 32 minutes after Caden went to sleep. 32 minutes of Caden being asleep, assuming that when Caden closed his eyes and saw Mikey asleep or resting, thought, well, Mikey Lair's probably going to do the same thing as Caden. But I suppose it wasn't the case. interpretations can differ. That's why it's important to acknowledge that. So, yeah, you could say some of Caden Pressey's claims, or what you can remember, counters or contradicts Jack Newton. But in fairness, there is Snapchat post hard evidence, not just words or hearsay, but hard evidence to suggest and show that there's discrepancies with what Caden Pressey originally said compared to hard evidence of similar times, same people, different location. Problematic, is it not? But Casey didn't mention anything of that in this interview, which was unfortunate. But beside that, to add on, Casey mentioned how with the Newton family, they haven't once reached out to Casey for support, to offer help, nor Jack Newton's biological mother. Supposedly. Is it possible that the Newton family and Jack's biological mother have reached out to other Presgrove family members and Casey was left out of it? Maybe. And there could be a breakdown in communication with the Presgrove family who don't relay the updates onto Casey. That'd be unfortunate. Casey isolated, other family members not so much. There's a bit of a backstory later on there. But when you've got the victim's family, you'd think the people that would be reached out to first would be directly the parents of that son or daughter that's passed, the parents most closest to that victim. So Casey would be one of them, being the mother. Would Victor Presgrove back it up, I wonder, with what Casey says? Who knows? But in addition to that, Casey said that Noah Presgrove would do everything with Jack Newton and the Newton family. And Casey was really good friends with Jack's mom, in quotes. If you're really good friends with someone, maybe the term expectation could be a bit strong, but without thinking, you would assume or hope that those that you're closest to would step up or at least try, maybe make an effort to be there to support you when you struggle. There are times and moments in life where a person may feel incapable, may not have the mental capacity, may struggle themselves. So when the other person struggles, the original one struggling can't really do much and it makes it hard on them. That's why in some circumstances, the sufferer has to also act as the rock and the anchor to the rest of the family or to a relationship. As much as the sufferer may be struggling, they are aware other people are struggling as well with the same stuff or other things. Someone has to stand strong, because if the strongest person falls, everybody else has no one to look up to. Roughly a quote which came from the Dylan Rounds true crime case when the mother, the victim's mother, their son Dylan Rounds, who died murdered, Candice Cooley, had to hold it together, as hard as it was. As other family members struggled, even the father getting emotional, Candice Cooley remained hard-faced, with a shield exterior. Someone had to hold it together, or at least in her mindset, so then people could look up to her. So when things are tough or difficult, people could just try and help themselves or be a little bit more at calm or at ease, knowing that there is someone that has it under control. If at least one person has it under control, it can't all fall and crumble. I do understand that. And that can apply in many different situations, small scale, big scale. Taking that in mind, that crossover, when a person maintains a certain face, a certain shield, a certain mask to protect themselves at times, other times to protect other people from not worrying or harming them, you get caught in a crossfire. You try and stay strong for other people, you'll get called a hard-faced individual. You don't care. You're not showing emotion. You're not reacting. Some people just don't react. Some people may not react or show the emotion when someone's crying or needs hugging. Everyone's different. But, Candice Cooley was questioned and criticised heavily by some people out there that she's not crying, so she must not care. That she's wearing makeup during an interview, so she must be more obsessed about her looks rather than her son. Claims like that, what people were making online and going in deep with. But there's that possibility that behind that mask, that individual, whilst they're holding it together or trying to maintain a strong front, inside, they are crumbling, they are sinking, they are drowning, they just don't show it. That's what can happen. But they feel there's a pressure, there's a responsibility, there's a weight on their shoulder to step up because other people may not be able to. And there needs to be at least a beacon, a statue, so everyone can gather around and be helped in some way. You can see how deep that can go there. When referring back, though, to Casey Smith not receiving the support that she supposedly wanted and needed, you could say it's quite shocking. Casey said that due to the lack of support, it makes it sound like they're guilty. They're guilty. Those that don't offer the support, those that are close but don't show it in action. They say it with words in the past. They say that they care. They're there for you. But when it gets difficult, they're nowhere to be seen. Based on what Casey has told us, and referring back to those named individuals, supposedly, when Casey says they're guilty, she means Jack Newton, the Newton family overall, and Jack's mom. Jack's mother, biological mother, is supposedly guilty. And Jack Newton is guilty. The Newton family, which involves Caleb, maybe Colton, are guilty, based on the interpretation and the vague wording by Casey. But guilty of what? Guilty by association, guilty by not physically or directly being responsible, but knowing what's up or what's happened, but covering for the real people that did do something. Could still say there's a level of guilt. That can eat away at people. It can lead to people crumbling and exposing, opening up, and maybe taking accountability at some point if it gets too difficult. Hopefully the lighting is okay. Seems a bit dim, but I hope the lighting is okay. Apologies about that. What else was there? Casey mentioned Mr. Newton, as in Caleb Newton's dad, which to Jack Newton would be Jack's grandfather. Jack, grandfather, and Caleb the father to Jack. The three guys that were supposed to be going on that fishing trip on that Monday, the day Noah died, but it was supposedly cancelled when Jack found out the news of Noah, and so on. But Casey, when referring to Jack Newton's grandfather, saying he was very sweet, kind, showed up, showed support, an innocent guy, an innocent person. But Casey said, I do believe he does know something. So not entirely innocent then. A good person, an individual that may care and show emotion to the right people, but also protects their own. Two different ends of the spectrum, one extreme to the other. Maybe because they're in a difficult position. They care about family and loyalty, but they also care about justice and an innocent person's suffering, or the consequences, the collateral damage that it does. Yeah, it can be a hard situation. So in terms of believing he knows something, I guess, because either Jack, Caleb, or another Newton family confessed maybe at one point, post-death of Noah, weeks later, months later, who knows? Casey Smith had mentioned that in quotes. She said, I think the girls played a role in washing my son's body off. Washing off what? DNA? Evidence? Fingerprints? See, the thing is, and you could add it on later, about being dragged, moved from one spot to another, because that's what Casey believes. Okay. But what was used? Surely gloves would need to be used. If you don't have gloves and you can't, cover your hands, you're going to leave prints. You wash your body down off DNA and evidence, touch-based DNA. Fine. But then when you start moving the body again, you're putting back on that DNA, that evidence, that touch-based fingerprints and all of that. You're kind of reversing what you've just done. Seems counterproductive in a way. Let me know your thoughts about that. We maybe go on in depth about it a bit later on. But for Casey to say, I think the girls played a role, whether she said I think or I believe, it's still an opinion, and that's it. Where's the hard evidence? At this moment in the interview, there isn't any displayed. But to think that the girls played a role, more than one girl. But which girls exactly, Casey did not mention or explain. The role of doing the washing inside of the house, links with the shower, and no Michael Fay's Kaz, and maybe some other people mentioned about there was blurry pixelated footage or a photo of Noah in the bathtub, unconscious on the ground in the bathtub, whether he was dead or not at that time, whether he was injured post beat down or attack, foul play, who knows. But other people have suggested, Noah was washed down but outside with a hose pipe or some kind of jet pressure washer or something. If Casey by any means was referring to being washed my son's body off of the writing on the back, the bottom area, that can be caused by not foul play, but an accumulation over the days. From Noah possibly having a wash at some point Saturday, having a wash from what we've heard of when he got back to his place of living on the Sunday in the morning time, and then supposedly having a wash on the Monday before leaving the party house. That's at least 3 washes, 2 or 3 washes. Then add into the mix the claim by Brooke Bounds Carter, the Red River, party goers including Noah, over that weekend coming and going from the river and playing in the water, salt water. It could also speed up the erosion of writing on the body. Okay? The only anomaly is that the original writing washed off, most of it maybe. We don't know about the bottom area from Saturday onwards, as in photos of when Noah was alive, because he was wearing the shorts, you couldn't see. But the writing on the back, the upper shoulder area, was faded, if not mostly gone, by Monday 1:05 in the morning. But then at 1:50, so like 45 minutes later, now there's suddenly new writing on Noah's chest and stomach area, which read, I eat ass. That's just from what I remember. You'll probably remember it as well. So it shows within a 45 minute difference, basing it on, it's true that it's 1:50 in the morning when Noah and Jack was in the bathroom on Monday, basing on that being true, it means within 45 minutes of Noah earlier at 1:05 appearing more clean and no writing on his front torso, 45 minutes later, now suddenly there is writing. It could have been written on in between that 45-minute time period, of course. The only problem is, the writing appeared very faded and smudged, like it was washed with water of some sort. So from 1:05 to 1:50 in the morning, what did Noah engage with in order to get wet and for the writing, which was applied during that time, to wash off as well? Did he go to the Red River within that 45-minute time frame window? Did Noah have a wash in between? Did anyone throw water at Noah or tried scrubbing him when messing about? Hopefully people remember those videos I did, because it's very important that the difference with time, the timeline of when writing was there to when it was not, to when it reappeared, but different writing to then it appeared faded. Different types of activity going on at the party. The act of writing on the body could be somewhat innocent. The act of scrubbing it off frantically Could be an act of foul play trying to cover up your tracks, but if your writing is on the body, you shouldn't worry too much if that said event was maybe documented and occurred before Noah had even died. It doesn't link to the death. Unless handwriting was going to be used by police to match the person that killed Noah, then maybe you would scrub the body clean off your own handwriting. I get that bit. But I don't think that was the main reasoning. But interesting. So what else do we have besides the girls playing a role in cleaning up? Casey Smith said, "My son was not a fighter." That's in response to the footage of Noah Presgrove and Brylan Sweat. So about 1:05 in the morning, when it was from Caden Pressey's point of view, when he was recording on the front patio, and Noah was like, "Come on, hit me, do it." Casey was saying Noah had his hands lower down, not up here. So it shows he wasn't a fighter. He wasn't being aggressive. But Noah does do wrestling, and when you're in a wrestling tournament or a situation, or even if you used to play it as a form of self-defense, in just a scenario, your hands may raise up to defend yourself. Not to punch, but to defend, to block, to grapple, to grab. That might have been done between the wrestling between Mikey Lair and Noah Presgrove Sunday night, from what Caden claimed, if you remember. Might have been play fighting, play wrestling, and that was all. It wasn't that deep, but a form of physicality nevertheless. But indirectly speaking, I could understand what Casey is referring to when considering the wrongful death lawsuit based on the response by Carter Combs and their affirmative defense, suggesting if it was to be used, I guess, in court, the possibilities claiming Noah Presgrove was an aggressor and kind of started a fight. So his outcome of death was his own doing in the first place for starting a fight with someone or some people and being aggressive. That's what the shocking claim was as part of the affirmative defense. Could be used in the future to shift the blame onto the victim, Noah, to lessen and ease the consequences, the punishment on that said defendant responsible or claimed to be responsible for Noah's death. You could say it's manipulative, you could say it's a bit twisted, different ways of looking at it. I get that. It's just very eye-opening, let's put it that way. Probably got the noise. This surface, things stick to it, it's ridiculous. Anyway, got some more notes which we'll get through in just a second, but it does get even more shocking, okay? So as a disclaimer, it does get even more shocking, so brace yourself nevertheless. I just want to make sure everything has been touched upon and mentioned, so nothing has been missed. So there's a role of girls playing a part, what she thinks. And look, this is what's important. It's not stated with an absolute fact, but some stuff she thinks, other stuff she believes. It's all an opinion, but some of it is more strengthened and other parts are more, I'm just thinking this. She must be influenced by something or someone she's heard to think and feel that way. It's understandable. But what she thinks and believes kind of differs to what's mentioned later, a possible contradiction. Just take that into mind later. So, with the next lot of notes, Casey mentioned due to what happened with Noah, the death and all that, she went to a darker place than where she was before. To do with drinking in California at this moment in time, going to AA meetings, Alcohol Anonymous, support groups, like a group of strangers come together, share their stories, get closer and try and heal and try and be open and support one another, have sponsors and all of that. That can be to do with drinking problems. You can have drug-related problems, different types of groups. It could be a form of therapy, a form of not being alone, and it can come in many different ways. But what happened to Casey? No exact date was given, I don't think, but it had happened previous. While she was in California, she met a guy from Duncan, Oklahoma. And that guy from Duncan knows some people from the party which Noah attended. Now, the way Casey Smith worded it, Casey, she referred to it as black guys, meaning more than one. The reason why that stands out is because the only black guy I could think of, and it makes me laugh a little bit because I remember a viewer on this channel from Paris, France called Miriam said, one of my viewers referred to Mikey Lair as in quotes, a brown guy, and they said, that's racist, that's racist. Yeah, a little bit politically correct and sensitive. Hypocritical because Miriam one night when drunk in the chat said the N-word. I said, I don't forget. Not that it bothers me. I'm not affected. But when people are a hypocrite, they're in no position to be talking whatsoever. Descriptive words to make sense of who is who. Mikey Lair, okay, also known as Mike Tyson as a nickname. But what's more important to me is, to my knowledge, I thought, just only based on the footage of the people that were there and caught on camera, I thought Mikey Lair was the only black guy present. But then again, it depends the descriptions of the colours of skin. You could have a white person, you could have a tanned person, you have a person from Mexico, Texas, and there's a slightly different gradient colour. Yeah. So, depends on the descriptions and if they're truly accurate. Based on the footage that what I've seen, I didn't see black guys, I just saw one, and that was Mikey Lair, supposedly. Does that make sense? But with Casey saying there's more than one, that's interesting, simply because I didn't know. So there are other people that were there that I guess weren't caught on camera because you would have known by it visually. Let me know your thoughts about that. Why does that matter anyway that a person, a stranger, had met Casey at this AA meeting or in California, who just so happens to know of partygoers that attended that party, which Noah did, because that guy knew of Casey Smith in the first place before Casey knew of him. So they were informed on the case and wanted to reach out and I guess communicate. And Casey mentioned that the guy she was talking to had an encounter at one point where one of the black guys, party goers, was talking about the party, the one that Noah attended, to the guy Casey met. There's a lot of guy, they, them. It can be a bit hard to keep up with who's who. But a party goer, just simply put, a party goer did communicate with this guy, and this guy relayed it on to Casey when they met, pretty much. Casey described it was like a crack in the case, which sounds very hopeful and positive, right? In quotes, it was mentioned that one of the black guys talking to the guy, which Casey is kind of friends with, in the past had mentioned they ran him off from the house and he's gonna get, and then it ended. I don't know if it meant gonna get a lawyer, gonna get something else, and it was a change of sentence. But said the way Casey was talking there, it was quite fast. The captions and the subtitles weren't always accurate, just as a heads up. But when they say they ran him off, him as in Noah Presgrove, so supposedly a group of black guys ran Noah Presgrove off from the house. What, chased him down? Why? Based on a previous or an original story, what we've heard of in the case, Noah Presgrove, after the shower, whatever time that was, after the supposed teabagging, after that, whatever time that was, after getting some food, whatever time that was, finally settling down to go to the bedroom or one of the girls' beds. From what Jack said, tried Logan, Noah was rejected. Then tried Avery. Avery felt like a second wheel, second best, rejected Noah. Then from what either Justin Roy and or Caden Pressey said, upon relaying stuff in the Partners in True Crime interviews, Noah supposedly called Avery a fat bitch. Okay? Whether Avery was humiliated or angry, frustrated, it was said by Caden and or Justin when Noah walked away, Avery chased after Noah. The wrongful death lawsuit states that there was a verbal fight with Jack Newton and Avery Howard against Noah Presgrove, a 2-on-1. No time given, but from interpretation, if Avery is going to be involved in a verbal fight with Noah, the timing of it could coincide with when Noah called her a fat bitch, supposedly. And there was unfinished business, and Avery wanted to give a piece of her mind to Noah. And for some reason, Jack stood up and supported Avery in the moment, so it made it a 2-on-1. And whilst being chased down, maybe Noah was in the process of walking away whilst the argument was going on. But that possible story and event is drastically different to what Casey Smith had claimed, based on a guy she had met, in which that guy has been told by a partygoer what really happened. But why would that partygoer spill the beans to some random guy, in a sense? Now, it wasn't just a case of a random partygoer being at a guy's house. There was connections in the background. I can't remember which way it was worded. Someone's daughter connected with a boyfriend, connected with a friend, whatever. I can't remember. But there was a connection for the person to be, warrant in being allowed to be in the house of that guy. But just to talk about the party and what really happened, they ran Noah off from the house. That doesn't sound positive. That sounds quite negative in a way. But in regard to additional context, not really given. Casey Smith said Noah Presgrove did have a girlfriend at the time, but she did not attend the party. That appears to be the truth. I'm familiar with two names, and I'm not going to say them because I always get mixed up. Fallon, Nevaeh, one or the other. I'm just going to keep it like that because I always forget. Regardless, it's been said Noah had a girlfriend, just did not attend the party. In the early days, news articles and some Presgrove family members claimed Noah had a girlfriend who was from the party, like Avery. So people got that wrong, misinformed, yet Casey knew what was up, just like how we did at some point. So it's consistent now, which is a good thing. The Noah Presgrove's girlfriend's mother had gave Noah Presgrove's leather jacket to Casey Smith's mom, which I think is Deborah Smith, if I'm correct in saying. However, Casey's mom hasn't given it to her. We've seen something similar to that in the past with that Facebook Messenger conversation where Casey said when it came to collecting possessions and items of Noah firsthand, such as the party-related ones and other stuff from the house where Noah was living, the likes of Robin Smith, Ashley Chadwick, and some other family members got first choice in Noah's possessions. Casey was last in line, bottom of the pecking order. The mother of all people was at the bottom of the pecking order. In any situation in general, that can come across as really disrespectful and insulting. In an emotional time, a sensitive time, it can be soul-crushing and destroying. Even if there wasn't a death and it's just communication with friendships, best friends, or relationship, you're supposed to be equal to one another and value one another, look up to one another, prioritize one another, etc., in a healthy way. But if you feel that you're not being treated correctly, and you deserve more, deserve better, you feel that you're put at the bottom of the list, of their list, you're at the bottom of the pecking order, it can come across as rude, it can come across as hurtful. Times that by 1,000,000 when it's in the Noah Presgrove situation. All Noah's mum wants is key memories of Noah and in relation to the party for maybe a level of comfort, closure, and a little bit of security. Maybe the scent of Noah, just the visual memory, comes in many different ways. And to be denied of that can be destroying. To be denied of that by the said people that are of your family, bloodline, even more crushing, insulting, being kicked when you're already down, metaphorically speaking. And that can apply in other areas in life as well. It's not good whatsoever. And people could say, why go in such depth in different ways or generalize different themes? Because I myself, in different ways on smaller scales, have been absolutely fucked over with time and time again by different people. So I know what it's like. Other people out there will say to me, you don't know what this is like, you don't know what that's like. Trust me, I fucking well do, in different ways. Beside that, what else? Casey brought up that Noah Presgrove was a handsome individual, and yeah, he got girls, but not girlfriends, besides one from Rico that was obsessed with him, which Fallon, Nevaeh, one or the other, I guess. I mean, in terms of that sentence or quote by Casey, I can't give my expert opinion on that because I can't relate to it. But in regard to Noah, in terms of based on what other people say, and the mother being an attractive individual, can be a magnetic approach where it will draw people to you. If at a party and if there's communication, one thing can lead to another. I believe it was Jack Newton, may have been joking, may have been serious, that labelled Noah, I think, a hoe or something, like sleeping around a lot or getting a lot of girls. From what Casey is wording it as, is Noah didn't have many meaningful, deep connections or relationships with people, with the exception of one. So Casey is kind of defending her son, as in an innocent person, but popular, and with the mix of his appearance, his popularity, it led to jealousy within others that could have took it out on Noah at the party and led to the death in some way or another, pretty much. But in contrast, besides Casey defending Noah, it was Robin Smith, the aunt to Noah, and the cousin Ashley Chadwick on Parts in True Crime that stated, well, when it came to Noah Presgrove, he was kissing Logan Jernigan and was doing a lot more than that, as in sexually speaking, which would imply, based on that, Noah was cheating on his girlfriend with another person. Yeah, doesn't look good, that. So you can see how the Presgrove family members describe Noah in different ways. Interesting. Beside that, Casey Smith, an important point, had mentioned Noah Presgrove's girlfriend was at work at the time of the party, doing her own thing. But Noah Presgrove's girlfriend had said, in quotes, Noah Presgrove was dropped off at Sonic that night. And I think Casey worded it as that night when the trauma started, or... To say that night, normally, in this case, when there's the storytelling, the articles, the news coverage, most people that refer to that night as in when Noah died. Because people are treating early Monday morning still as Sunday night because people hadn't gone to sleep yet. So they still treated it as Sunday night, not Monday morning. But when you're basing it off a timeline, a retrospective look, you do it by date, by day. So Noah died on Monday, not Sunday, not the night time, but early morning onwards of Monday. But in terms of Noah being dropped off at Sonic and being picked up to be taken back to the party that night, that can't be Monday, can it? It would mean Sunday. And Sunday, as in what we've already heard in the past, that Noah Presgrove in the morning time had left the party people after breakfast in Warwick at the gas station to make it back home to do his own thing, to spend time supposedly with his girlfriend. And I guess his girlfriend went back to work or went to work depending on shifts or time. And somehow Noah was dropped off at Sonic. For Casey to say Noah Presgrove's girlfriend said Noah was dropped off, does that mean Noah during the day or at some point was spending time with his girlfriend and his girlfriend dropped Noah off at Sonic for her to then go on to work? Is that possible? Or was Noah Presgrove with a different group of people and was dropped off at Sonic to get food? And the person or people that dropped Noah off left. Not abandoned him, but just left. So then Noah, at some point, was then picked up by Gage Jessen to go to the party. But when was the call made? Not that it's the absolute case scenario, but part of me is thinking, is it possible that if Noah was dropped off at Sonic, depending on the time of when Jack made the call to Noah to say, come back to the party, was there a convincing factor to get Noah to go down to the party because Noah had nowhere else to be, or more so nowhere else to go because he was stranded as he was dropped off and left by himself at a place, depending on how far away it was from his place of living, I could get that wrong. Maybe the call was made earlier. And then in between, Noah agreed to it, but did other stuff. And then when at Sonic, he agreed to be picked up by Gage Jessen at that spot. Maybe. But if not, you could say with Noah being dropped off at Sonic, if the call was made then by Jack about come to the party, Noah may have been more inclined to follow it up because he was stranded and needed a lift anyway to get somewhere. I don't know personally the timing of it all, but if that was true, well then in an alternative scenario, if Noah hadn't been dropped off and stranded, if he was back at home and Jack wanted him to come back, would Noah have been more likely or less likely under those circumstances? You let me know in the comment section below. But it's interesting with Casey giving context behind who said it, who claimed it. But once again, these points I've not heard of before. If they have been mentioned in the past online, they've certainly not been regurgitated since. That's a major problem. Now, if I was in the case early on and I heard about this stuff, I'd be repeating it over and over again. More of a broken record than Justin Roy could ever be. You know what I'm saying? Because repetition is important. Sometimes it comes across as boring. Sometimes it comes across as annoying, but repetition shows that you care because you find something or some stuff important enough to say. Make it bold, make it loud, make it memorable, and let people know and remind people of why it needs to be acknowledged, right? Beside that, some additional points by Casey Smith. These are opinions. She thinks Noah was washed off before disposed of on site of the property. Killed or mostly injured on the property, washed off of evidence. Casey said she thinks that Noah Presgrove was somewhat alive or a little alive when his body was being dragged, like from a vehicle, or Noah was holding onto a vehicle or holding onto something. And this is where it gets more important. Casey had said Noah Presgrove had no skin on his fingers. Even Victor Presgrove, the father, saw it too. And Casey was like, what the hell is going on? At what point did they see that? Now, Casey mentioned that she did see the autopsy early on, before we did. The problem is, based on the official autopsy document and papers, nowhere does it state shredded fingertips. Nowhere does it state damage to the fingertips to that extent. So, where did it come from? Originally, the general public kept talking about shredded fingertips, but it was never mentioned in the public autopsy report, so it was hard to believe. I think, and I don't know for certain, some people may have suggested it came from one of the family members, or one of the family members mentioned it, but made a mistake and it wasn't exactly true. But it just spread like wildfire. I mean, when people hear about shredded fingertips and how you could interpret it, what caused it, yeah, it can be quite shocking and it could come across as a form of foul play, etc. But the context, the origins of how it came about, interesting. So other family members may have known about it from what people said online, but Casey knew of it herself with a level of confidence. Casey and Victor. Not what they were told, not just from the autopsy, but what they saw. Now, would that have been at the wake? Would it have been before, maybe during the time of having to identify the body and confirm it's your son? Maybe. You know, what Casey says here is extremely important, shocking, groundbreaking, and game-changing. I know Justin Roy, I know many other familiar named people have mentioned this and even relayed it, but very often people haven't given the source. They just said, trust me, bro, or can't reveal the source, but just trust me, or it came from family, it came from this. It's hard to believe in a third-party representative acting on behalf of the original person. You want to hear it from the horse's mouth. And until that happens, you remain skeptical. It's not a game. It's not a game of who's right or who's wrong in that circumstance. It's a matter of timing and trust. You want to hear it from the horse's mouth. More so, you want to see hard evidence. In this circumstance, then, there's no hard evidence. What we're hearing, what they're telling us, as important as it is that you've got a family member, the mother, telling us Noah's fingers were damaged, no skin on his fingers, also interpreted by others, shredded fingertips, maybe down to the bone, or could have been slightly exaggerated that. You'd hope to believe in that, in what Casey says as a fact. But it's just words. That's only basing it off the mess of this case, the trust issues, the damage already caused. It's unfortunate. It can change people. But it also adds a layer of complexity. What Casey and in the background Victor, what they say, what they believe, what they know as a fact, they're telling us with words which could be considered hearsay. But what they've experienced themselves could be hard evidence, as in Casey saying she saw it. If you saw it with your own eyes and it was that clear, then it must be true. But it's hard to translate that to the general public when you're unable to provide hard evidence, or you're not able to, or you don't want to. You know what I'm saying? You want to believe in what's being said. It's the mother of all people. You want to believe them, and you should be able to. With all the trust issues, with all the other chaos in the background, it makes everything a little bit more murky. And at times when things can be very highly emotional, language and wording a bit all over the place, there can be misinterpretations along the way, from people in the community to even certain family members at times. Maybe not often, but sometimes some little mistakes can be made. And then it can get out of hand and become more complex than what it was to begin with. So, with that being said, the bits above are more opinions, thinking Noah was washed off before being disposed of, highway. Thinking Noah was alive when his body was being dragged. would imply he was finished off after. But why in that order? But to mention that Noah Presgrove had no skin on his fingers, what would I say about that? Well, let me put it this way. I have mentioned it in the past, based on the conditions being correct. So if people try throwing it at me now and saying, oh, told you so, do not act like an impetuous, petty prat, okay? Look back at my videos, look, listen and learn, and you will see. There's a process to it all. But what I will say, reflecting and retrospectively speaking on the conditions that that was true and it did happen, it does increase the chances of foul play, at least, in my opinion. With the legs and lower body being pretty much undamaged for the most part of it, with the exception of the back of the heel on one of the foots being bruised, I think it was. A person being dragged could cause certain abrasions and markings on the body. If the legs are held up high, the legs aren't dragging across the ground, it's only the upper part of the body, maybe for a short distance. And it might not be as drastic as being tied or towed and dragged by a vehicle, maybe simply more so being dragged by the hands of someone, a person, for a short distance from ground to vehicle. But why drag Noah when you could just pick Noah's body up? Why wouldn't people do that? The act of dragging a body, alive or not, as bad as it already is another layer and level of disrespect. Just like how when it comes to getting rid of a body, how you dispose the body. Is it a respectful burial? Or is it desecration, full-on disrespect and damage? Is it a peaceful burial, or are they outright dumped in the open and exposed without any peace, even in depth? Are they disposed of and submerged in water in such a sneaky way and never to be seen again, or for that closure to know where the true burial is at? Lack of respect. Sometimes during deaths, if it's down to an accident and it's gone too far, a form of manslaughter, or even if there is a murder and for some reason there's a level of guilt behind the perpetrator, they might do something respectful. Not always. They might close the eyes of the person so they're at peace. They might fold the arms and cross them. They might fold some clothes up nearby. They might leave a flower behind as a sign of respect, even though what they did was very disrespectful in the first place. There can be a weird overlap at times with people, and sometimes it can be a form of guilt leaking through. Maybe some people by nature aren't true killers or murderers, but somehow they get involved in that, and at the same time they're dealing with the conflict of regret and guilt at times, not always. With that being said, being dragged, fingertips being removed, well, the skin, friction, traction with the ground being somewhat rough to cause that tension and friction. Whether Noah was dead or alive at that time, it could still happen regardless. But if you're clinging on to dear life, clinging onto it whilst you're being dragged away, that could cause skin to tear, to rip, or if you're scraping and crawling at the ground to try and free yourself as someone's grabbing your ankle, pulling you away. Just like how if a person was like in a horror film, they're being carried or dragged and they're scratching and clawing on the walls, on the ceiling with their nails, as the nails break and shatter and break down, but the scrape marks remaining, left behind. It's like with Noah Presgrove possibly gripping onto dear life, desperately trying to escape or stop himself from being taken any further to wherever they were going to take him. That's why it does imply more likely foul play under those circumstances, in my opinion. In terms of falling out the back of a moving vehicle or falling out the side of a vehicle under an accident, could you get shredded fingertips there? Maybe not the same way. Not the same way as when you actually dragged. So, yeah. What else do we have? Casey also mentioned wash Noah's body, drag body off property in the order of how things went. It does get more shocking though, supposedly what's been said. Casey, in the interview, had claimed, with a level of confidence like a fact, Casey said, I know the girl at the party called the guy who owns the property, and said, Noah Presgrove is dead. What do we do with his body? And the property owner said, get it off the property. How true is that? Casey broke down a little and said, I do have a witness to that. Who is that witness? A party goer? And is that witness a part of a defendant on a wrongful death lawsuit, or are they innocent? I wonder. To say Casey knows the girl at the party, one specific individual, would that be Carter? Would it be Avery? Would it be Logan? They are defendants on a wrongful death lawsuit, at least for other reasons. Could one of those girls be responsible? Other girls that were there, Jasmine Millan, Stephanie Millan at some point. Anyone else? Oh, Georgia Brealey, just to name females that were there at different points on the Monday, at least. So you let me know in the comment section, who do you think Casey was referring to by knowing the girl at the party? For the girl to call the guy who owns the property, possibly there are family connections, which would narrow it down, based on that, to Carter Combs or Avery Howard, the birthday girl, who also live at that party house, who are also host. The guy who owns the property, I think, is Johnny Trout Wilcoxon, who, correct me if I'm wrong, the father to Stevie Howard. Just so happens that those named individuals are also defendants on a wrongful death lawsuit, so that's interesting, that. The wording with what Casey says in regard to the girl, saying that Noah's dead, what do we do with his body? It implies that this said girl is caught up or involved with multiple people. To say we, what do we do? Not what do I do for the mistake I made or for the bad action that I've done. No, it's what do we do? It's like a collective term, meaning more than one person is involved possibly in Noah's death and the attempted cover-up. And based on how it's worded, Johnny Trout Wilcoxon, supposedly, based on what Casey relays from a witness, I guess, is that get it off the property. It shows, the level of disrespect. Not get Noah off the property, not get him off the property, but get it. It's a human, it's a person. It's a 19-year-old male. And supposedly an innocent person. And in death, they're being described as it, like an object, an inanimate object. Not a person, but an object. That's a dark way of looking at it, Doesn't look good, doesn't sound good whatsoever. There's not much emotion behind it. They're more concerned about the property, more concerned about having blood on their own hands than there are with Noah, under what's been stated here. Interesting to know who this witness is, of course. Casey then said she cannot believe that these party people said Noah was a real special person and that they loved him, yet they won't step up. I get that. But this is the thing. A person can supposedly be loved. A person can be described as special. And a lot of it will occur with words. And often maybe when it's too late, when something has already happened and it's bad, the outcome. Other times it could be said over time, accumulatively. It can even apply to compliments. People with time could give lots and lots of compliments to you. Not that it's always the case, you'd hope to think the more compliments you receive, the better you might be in life, or with a network group, a support system, foundations, friendships, relationships, whatever. But it is possible, the dark reality, to receive lots of compliments and to have absolutely nothing and no one, and to suffer in silence, to be lonely. It's very possible to be described as a loved person, a great guy, a nice guy. And where are they when you need them? Or after? Nowhere to be seen. Reality is, and it can apply in this situation what Casey's getting at, she may not know why it can be that way. I do. Because it's easy to say the right words. It's hard to perform the actions, though. You could even say, I'm here to support you, or I'm here for you. But can you show it with action? As in being punctual, showing up, being present, being active, being frequent, providing perspective, helping them in some way, and doing it somewhat often. Depending on the situation and how close you are to a person or people, it may differ, but certain words can be exchanged, but there needs to be a level of action as well. If a person says that they love you, but in terms of in action, they don't show it, do they really love you? Or is there other issues going on which prevents them from being able to physically demonstrate it and show it? So there are some external factors out of your own control, which you may not know of, which kind of blurs the overall perspective and creates uncertainty, the unknown, leads to the mind wandering and thinking possibly the worst case scenarios. But yes, when there's a lack of support, there's a lack of care, there's a lack of showing up, but they're very quick to use all the right words, is because words are easy, actions are hard. Through friendships to more so relationships, and in this case, a death situation, if people supposedly cared, they would do more, they would say more. What Casey says is probably roughly like what Justin Roy was getting at over and over again with time. That if they do care or if they do know, they're certainly not, because they're not saying anything, they're not doing enough, they should do more. The only counterpoint to that is sometimes people can come across as if they don't care because they're not doing enough, but sometimes they may not be doing enough because they simply don't know what to do, or they don't have much to do, or don't have much to say. It's just an example. Just an example. If there was a death of someone on the highway, not that it directly applies to Noah, but just in general, and no one knows what happened, but everybody cares about that said person and says all the right stuff and nice, and they were a witness to that person earlier when they were alive, surely someone should know something, should be saying more, doing more, talking more about, at least someone knows what happened to that person to die on the highway. But if there was ever a chance of an accident and it was in such a way, just for example, victim in the back of a vehicle, driver, passenger, completely unaware of the victim in the back. They're just driving along like normal, like any other time. And that victim somehow falls out and dies upon impact or shortly after. The other two people driving drive off, completely oblivious to what's happened, never knew of that in the first place. So you can't expect them to take action, to do more, if they don't know anything to begin with. If you don't know, then you don't know, and there's nothing you can do. If you're indirectly reminded, though, with CCTV footage, surveillance, whilst in the moment you didn't know, you will do now. Well, in the Noah Presgrove case, there was no surveillance down the highway, so you can't really excuse that. But that was just a very small example and a counterpoint I wanted to bring up there. Besides that, Casey said she thinks, once again, an opinion, thinks that Jack Newton, Caleb Newton, Caden Pressey, a couple of the girls, and the black guys know the truth. Well, in what way? Because, once again, it's an opinion, but now for Caden Pressey's name to be dragged into it, it makes him look bad. If Caden Pressey knows the truth, has Caden Pressey been upfront and honest to us, or has he only said so much and then the rest is in the background as he's working alongside people in the background, maybe? But with the discrepancies by Caden, it does create a bit of doubt and uncertainty, or it did at the time, unless that was done on purpose to play dumb when the actual truth was in the background. I'd say it's just an opinion by Casey, but if Casey believes Jack and Caleb definitely have a role in a dark way, and that the black guys were running Noah off the property, which sounds bad and negative, and that a couple of girls may have played a role in washing Noah up, sounds bad, and then you include Caden Pressey in the same sentence, knowing the truth, doesn't sound too good. But maybe Casey more so thinks that Caden knows who's responsible and is in a difficult position and is trying to get the truth out in certain ways. As I said, Caden did say in that leaked call or audio to do with, what was it, Netflix or Jan Fiorillo, The Office, whatever, Caden was willing to wire himself up and talk to those partygoers to get them to confess. That's what Caden was willing to do, even if it meant death. That's how far Caden was willing to go. So if Caden's willing to get the truth out of people, it means at this moment or at that time, he didn't know the full truth. Because even Caden said he doesn't think, or he hopes the friends aren't responsible. It'd be hard to believe that. Something along the lines of that at one point. So when Caden says, I'm willing to wire myself up to get people to confess, it implies that Caden doesn't know the absolute truth just yet. But he has a sense, a feeling, an opinion that they could know of more, but he has to do something with action in order to get the proof and evidence, which would go against what Casey said in a way, but that's just a little observation, that's all. However, of course, through the interview, Casey did mention about it feeling overwhelming and difficult, which is very normal and understandable. Casey, in quotes, the girl who took the Noah Presgrove missing picture was 5:15 in the morning or something. Well, just as a correction, that girl taking that photo, Snapchat selfie, was at 3:43 a.m, not 5:15. Maybe Casey mentioned 5:15 indirectly because of Caden Pressey's timeline, maybe. But no, it's 3:43 when Jasmine Millan took the selfie and said, well, Noah's missing, and that was 11 minutes after Noah had walked away, which is interesting. And she was smiling in the photo, and her hair and also her top was a little bit wet and damp, probably because of the shower, because Jasmine was there assisting Noah with having a wash a bit earlier. You can kind of make out the order of how things went, at least. So, with the timing being off by Casey, she said 5:15 or something, so clearly she wasn't for certain, she wasn't confident, but that's just a little example. It doesn't define everything, but it's just a little example which could imply that if they don't know the true time and they're just throwing it about 5:15 or so, it's some girl or something, do they really know what they're talking about? I don't want that to come across as nasty or insulting, but under the strain, the difficulties and stress and everything going on, like with people with the trauma, the memory loss, when recounting details and stuff, it doesn't always come out quite right or quite accurate. It's not done with intent, it's accidental. Maybe that applies to Caden. Maybe it applies to some of the partygoers as well. You got to look at it that way. Just wanted to clear it up. Adding on to that, Casey believes that Jasmine Millan was smiling in that selfie because she knows that Noah Presgrove was dead at the time. That's basically what Casey said. She thinks that the reason why Jasmine Millan was smiling because it was around the time of Noah's death and she knew about it. Which sounds very dark. Jasmine Millan at one point was in some relationship with Noah, or a casual one, because there was footage on TikTok which was edited by Jasmine's sister Jade Millan, I think, then uploaded by the mother Renee Millan onto TikTok, of Noah and Jasmine Millan kissing each other and looking deep into their eyes. Post-death of Noah onwards, Jasmine Millan did get a tattoo with Noah's name and a dove or something. A person who is supposedly laughing in the face of death, laughing at the death, smiling and enjoying it of Noah's expense and Noah's death. Would Jasmine Millan really do that and then later get a tattoo of Noah as a reminder? Would they really? It's interesting then. I know some of the general public have believed that the reason why Jasmine Millan was smiling in the snap was because they know what happened to Noah and involved and they find it good or fun. But for Noah's mom to think the same way is really eye-opening. As for me, due to the slight lack of eye contact being off, they looked more drunk than sober, so might not quite be there with it. If they say, well, Noah's missing, technically yes, because he walked away at 3:30 and 3:43, nowhere to be seen, so yeah, that's true, observation. But saying, oh, well, Noah's missing and smiling, that could be more so, oh, here we go again. He's gone off, he's walked away, like the other times. Could have been meant in a joking way, and it wasn't actually meant, but it's been taken the wrong way since. Different interpretations. Look, it's the same, or it might be a bit different. It's a little bit the same with supposedly Avery saying to Noah, Sunday morning, I think, finding Noah and Logan sleeping side by side. And Avery said, if I find out you two have done anything, I'm going to kill you. If Noah never died, people wouldn't look at it under a microscope. They would think, oh, it's just a passing comment, slight dark humour, not actually meant. But obviously with Noah dying, you look back at that line by Avery and think, oh, there might be a connection. It's understandable. It all comes down to timing of stuff and when it's said. Just like Stevie Howard saying, well, if us parents are so evil and bad, if we were responsible for Noah's death, we would have done a better job at burying the body so no one would be able to find it. Well, yes, Noah's body wasn't buried, so that must mean that those people, the parents, didn't get involved because they would have done a better job if they had. But it's like they're giving a scenario based on what they're capable of and that they're better at that job than others who would leave it out in the open. Either it's like foreshadowing what they could do next to someone else, or they're hinting at what they've done in the past, and it just doesn't look good. It's bad timing and it makes you look suspicious. Why would anyone word it like that? So, yeah. Beside that, Casey then started going on about Jefferson County, that there's corruption. Look, we've seen it online, Justin Roy, other people talk about corruption here, corruption there, people being paid off, police as well, etc. But Casey said a lot of bad stuff's going on. In a Terrell store, a guy put a camera in a girl's bathroom. Now, I think online something like that had happened in December of 2025. But before that, at some point, there was another one, and it was to do with Cash Allsup. But I think that was in Waurika. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it was at an established building. In the restroom, female restroom, like a camera was secretly put into the air conditioning unit by Cash Allsup and was caught out and punished, arrested, whatever. Cash Allsup, at least in the past, with the Noah Presgrove case being the, I think, chief volunteer firefighter guy. Someone who supposedly wore a high-vis jacket and had a beard and was short and stubby at the highway. Someone that could match roughly the description as to what Caden Pressey was describing, even though it was at different times, which is unusual. And Cash supposedly had a specific vehicle similar to what Caden described, a white one. So, service truck. But Cash was there at 6 in the morning onwards. Caden's timeline's 5:15, so one's right, one's wrong. Apologies about that. So, just thought I'd just add that in for context. I'm just wondering if when Casey was referring to the Terrell store guy, the camera secretly put in the girl's bathroom, is that another event? Or is Casey getting mixed up with Cash Allsup, not in Terrell, but Warwicker. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's just based on what I can remember myself. Right, oh my God. So many notes, but there was a lot being mentioned. I'll try and speed up now because I know timing and everything. I appreciate your patience. K.C. Smith had said a lot of corruption in Jefferson County. That's flat out what she said, in quotes. Interesting. If there is corruption in Jefferson County, how badly does it impact and get in the way of the Noah Presgrove case and justice for Noah? You let me know. Casey also mentioned, based on the autopsy report and hearing about it earlier on and not wanting to hear any more details, she, as in whoever was telling her those details, the interviewer said, "Who's she?" And Casey didn't answer, did not give a name, just carried on talking. Okay? So, yeah, Casey does refer to she, a girl, he, this and that, and through the interview, it's hard to know who she's referring to. It could be a medical examiner, it could be some expert that had access to the documents in the first place. But Casey said so much bruising on Noah, as well as missing blood. Missing blood, which other people like Justin Roy and others have said, not at the highway, it must be elsewhere, and Noah must have been elsewhere first to then end up at the highway. Casey basically agrees with Justin and other people, and it seems to be over time. In terms of blood still within the body, blood soaked on the sheets ×2, towel or so, with Caden Pressey's situation, or by one of the truckers and then by police afterwards, body being covered. Some blood in the ruts underneath Noah's body from what BBC had a conversation with a person that was at the scene, supposedly. There might be some additional blood here and there, but was there enough to justify it? It's very divided, basically. I think there's more people that say there wasn't enough blood at the scene. I guess one thing that I will say is, to negotiate, in terms of blood patterns, a lack of it. If you was to fall out of a vehicle and maybe be dragged along or scrape along, would there be at some point a bit of blood, a bit of a splatter? Was there a lack of it at the highway? Or a lack of it being mentioned public? I'd say yes. So that is a slight problem, or a fair problem, in my opinion. Okay? I don't rush all in just in case things do change or add on. See, originally it was stated that there was blood here and there, but it turned out to be markings, stains on the ground, which weren't to do with Noah. So that caused confusion as well. Because if it was true, it wouldn't have made sense based on where the patches were. I mean, there was described as a bit of blood near to Noah, but there was a bit of distance between Noah and the blood, and there was no splatter in between. So that's what was a bit unusual, in my opinion, besides the issue of lack of blood. But to say that there was so much bruising on Noah, but there wasn't, was there? And I know people said for and against whether it was a beatdown and an attack, there'd be more bruising on the body. If melee items were used, more bruising, but there wasn't any. When the surface layer, the skin, the cells, the blood vessels burst, and then the blood rises to the surface under the skin, and so on. And it can vary on colour depending on the impact, the trauma, the effects, and all of that. Yeah. Was there anything else? Bruising on one of the heels. That was mainly it. But to say that there was so much bruising elsewhere, I'm just wondering, is that because of what Casey saw with her own eyes? Depending on the timing of it, because I know people online, when they were mentioning about was it liver mortis? Is it liver mortis or something, where it mentioned about the discoloration of skin, the purpleness of it, and some people mistaken that for bruising when it wasn't. Did Casey see that and assume it was bruising when it wasn't, and got mixed up? Because look, if there was a lot more bruising on the body, you could maybe support that more with a possible beatdown and more foul play. For an example, I guess. Beside that, Casey said the heard. Oh yeah, this was a bit of a weird one. She said she heard, meaning someone told her or she was listening in. That could mean anything really, just like how we've heard stuff which may have not been the truth. But Casey in the interview said she heard that they tore down a barn and then referred to it as the barn, Well, the only barn I can think of is right next to the party house on the party house property. You know that barn which I kept referring to in my early videos, picking up on it before most people did. You know, you look at the footage, Saturday night, Sunday night, or whatever. At one point, the barn doors are open, another point, the barn doors are closed. We never really saw footage inside of the barn, but it was like, well, what happened there? I even did a video. As much as people like to make slanderous claims about me, as we know who, if you look back at my previous videos, I did deep analysis, early days, to try and work out why there was grass in the shoelace inside of Noah's shoes and Caden's mismatched, and how Noah could have been leaving the house, got ambushed, grabbed, dragged away from the house into the darkness, the shadows, taken around the back of the shed barn or taken into the shed barn and then taken out, attacked there, away from it, so to muffle the noise and out of sight. Maybe. If anything did go on inside of that barn, and if it was torn down to get rid of evidence, maybe. But at what point was it torn down? Immediately or later? And was it for the same reasons or context, or was it just simply torn down because it wasn't used anymore? It had no purpose. If there's a big gap in between the events, then maybe it doesn't link. If it's very close together, maybe it does. If there was a sudden barn fire, that could be to dispose or get rid of evidence. But if it's so spaced apart, really, the only time when you would need to take action is in the moment, before police come down, before an investigation is done. Because if time passes by and you know there's not going to be any more searches, there's really no need to get rid of evidence if no one checked or went for it in the first place. You know what I'm saying? You'd have more than enough time to preserve that barn and just clean it down if you really needed to get rid of evidence, because they didn't get it in the first place. They're not going to get it now. There's no worry. I think I'll have to look back personally, because I can't remember based on the angling. I might have said you can't really oversee the barn, or maybe that's because it's already torn down. When Joyce Bergow was going down the highway when visiting somewhere, she went down the highway and passed by the party house. And from Joyce Bergow's point of view, diagonally, you saw the party house from the side, but I don't think you could see the barn, the shed, as it was probably covered by the party house. And if not that, maybe the barn is no longer there. So it could be true that it was torn down, but the reasoning behind the barn possibly being torn down could be a mystery. But you could see how it could link to getting rid of evidence and cleaning up, but it all comes down to the timing of that, though. The earlier, the sooner, the more linkable; the later, the further away, the less likely it applies. Beside that, Casey said in quotes, "Why didn't the cops get the ATV, the guns, the golf clubs?" Well, the golf clubs supposedly went missing. The real question is, when did they supposedly go missing? We did see Casey reconfirm and acknowledge that when it came to Facebook Messenger conversation, which I did a video about some months ago. So it's quite fresh and recent, that. Counterpoints by other people online and communities have stated and claimed that the police did take or check the ATVs, or one of them at least, a few times. So that speaks volume. Yet Casey says that they weren't taken or checked by police. As for the guns, they weren't checked or taken, but Renee, when there, post-death of Noah, wanted to gather them all up and then hand them over to Caleb, for then Caleb to hand them back to the rightful owners. But two of the three guns, the two owners of the three guns, were already at the party house, so they didn't need to be collected or rounded up. The owners were already in possession of them. So it's a bit weird, that. Only 2 to 3 firearms, and yet there's 40 to 50 party goers, and some maybe from the dove hunt. What about the other firearms? Was there any, or was it only 2 to 3? And in terms of what was seen on camera, on footage, there was only one, which was Isaac Rojas' 12-gauge shotgun. The other two, not caught on camera, so. The counterpoints by other people online have said, well, the reason why the police didn't take the guns because the injuries didn't match that and it was irrelevant and it wasn't necessary. Really, all items, whether they belong to Noah, should be treated as evidence. All items and things and even people at the scene of the crime, scene of the event, scene of where someone was last seen should all be untouched until cleared and processed. So it could all be important. Even if the injuries don't match, It can all be important, or should be, at least. I know some people said the guns, the stock, the shape, the butt, fish type pattern symbol, and the stock could be consistent with on the head somewhere, the scalp being torn, maybe. Should still be all treated equally as possible evidence, no harm. The question is, when did the golf clubs truly disappear? We don't know. Besides that, this is where there's a slight contradiction, in a way. The interviewer asked, do you think the friends killed Noah Presgrove? And Casey said, I hope not. Kind of implying that there's not a high level of confidence in their innocence, but also not a high level of confidence in lack of innocence. You know what I'm saying? I know on and off she kept saying, I think this and I think that, but at times she said, I believe, or this is what happened, this person said this person said that. Just one example being where Casey said, I know the girl from the party that called the guy who owns the property and said, well, Noah's dead, what should we do with him? And then followed orders from there. At least one girl did that and followed orders. And Casey knows that for a fact because she's been told that from a witness that knows of it. But how reliable is that witness? Who knows? But if Casey knows it as a fact and states it as a fact, and it's the girl from the party, it sounds quite prominent, like a memorable name, maybe Carter, maybe Avery, maybe Logan, maybe Jasmine. End of the day, one of those girls at least, a friend to Noah, meaning when the interviewer said, do you think the friends killed Noah? And Casey says, I hope not. You go from saying, this is what happened to, I hope it didn't happen. You get what I'm saying? But in all fairness, the question did say, do you think the friends killed? Not, do you think the friends disposed or covered up for others? So you could counter it and say, well, if Casey says, I hope not, just like how Caden Pressey said, I hope not, it would imply that maybe the friends did not kill Noah, but definitely assisted in the cover-up. So who is the true killer then? A non-friend of Noah? If Casey stands by and says, I hope that the friends did not kill, it would mean a stranger to Noah may have killed. So who would that be then? Would that be John Jane Doe, A to Z, on the wrongful death lawsuit defendants list? Unnamed at this moment. Could be. Beside that, Casey, in quotes, I think they all know a little bit of something. There's a bit of backtracking now. Casey went in early specifically stating what was what or what she believes in and what she's heard, right? Specific details. So people do know things. People know maybe more than others. And now Casey's saying, I think they all know a little bit of something. That just sounds almost like backtracking on what's been said, but I don't think it's done with absolute intent. It's just casual wording, but still just a little bit of contradiction. That's just an opinion by me. Casey said, Casey didn't contest the Carter Combs phone being wiped. The interviewer pushed heavy on that at one point about Carter's phone being wiped so much that her boyfriend's phone number wasn't even on it either. BBC, Brooke Bounce, Carter and some other people online have claimed that the reason why Carter Combs' phone appeared wiped is because from the party onwards, she had a brand new phone because 1 week before was in a car accident. Her phone was completely damaged, so she had to buy or get a new phone and didn't have time to add on the contacts and all the other stuff what she would have had. And if the previous phone was that damaged, she probably wouldn't be able to transfer all the stuff over anyway. So the phone appears wiped because it's brand new, the phone. All you need to do, and maybe it's not good enough, this, but to try and back up the story of the car crash incident a week before or so, would be to try and find the receipt of when that phone was bought, possibly, maybe. But beside that, it just seemed quite one way, as in, yeah, that's what happened, phone wiped, hiding something. Casey Didn't go all in on it. She just went, yeah, yeah. Basically, could be interpreted as she agrees with it, that Carter Combs' phone was wiped. But she didn't go into detail or explain any more past that point. You can interpret it however you want. Casey said in quotes, Noah Presgrove was planted at the highway, staged, dumped, disposed of at the highway. Quite eye-opening for Casey to say that. And because of how she worded it, Noah was planted. Not could have been, not I think or I believe, but that's what happened. So Casey must know to know that that's exactly what happened. Yeah? Interesting. Wasn't really added on anymore for context, but yeah. Casey mentioned, I think, once again, going back to an opinion as for the cause of death, I think that they ran Noah Presgrove over with a vehicle. They drove him whilst alive and then bashed his head in. Why does it need to be done in sequences, in different areas? If they're going to do it, and it sounds like with a level of intent, you think you'd finish what you started all in the same space and not spread it out. If you're going to run over Noah's body, upper body, for example, to cause those injuries and crushing injuries, then, not for it to sound bad, why not bash his head in whilst you're there? What is the point in running him over, picking him up whilst he's still alive or dragging him, getting him into the car, driving to, the highway, and then finishing him off there? But then again, if his head was bashed in at the highway, there'd be more blood or more splatter, and there wasn't. That's a problem. So Noah was finished off at the end of the property, somewhere else on the highway, as I've suggested in the past. It's weird. It's an opinion by Casey Smith. Let's just make that very clear. What she thinks happens, not what she knows that happens. But there's a handful of people over time online that have suggested crushing injuries and being run over is a possibility. Still the usage of a vehicle, but under different circumstances. But for Noah to be run over, was he flat down already and then ran over? I mean, a hit and run, you could be walking along and then you're hit by a vehicle, flung about, rolled over and land on the floor, die or bleed out slowly. Hit and run, and they speed off. If you were already flat down or forced to remain flat down and then someone ran over you, is that a hit and run or not? Probably not. But who and how would they have got Noah on the floor, maybe, for him to be ran over? How exactly? Something must have happened before being ran over, as in a confrontation, a fight, grappling, taken down to the ground, pinned down, something to hold him in place whilst he gets run over. It sounds like some kind of medieval torture method in a way, but it's just basing it off interpretation and what Casey thinks. And then bashed his head in afterwards. At what point? And then at what point was his body washed? Before his head was bashed in or after? Casey said, in quotes, they found 2 different types of gravel near or around Noah. I think the narrator, the interviewer, stated the gravel was in the shoes. I've not really heard that before, but then again, the autopsy mentioned about black stuff being on Noah, the asphalt or something, that type of gravel maybe. But I wasn't sure about a second piece or a second type of gravel. Does that mean 2 types of gravel, one from the highway, one from the dirt road? 2 types of gravel could imply 2 locations of where the things took place, which increases the chance of foul play and possible murder. If that's what was meant. But Casey's interpretation, or how she worded it, was that Noah Presgrove went from one side of the road to the other. What, the highway? From one lane to the other, crossing over somehow? By Noah's own choice, or when Noah was being dragged? See, the dirt road probably doesn't really have gravel, just dirt, but there might be some loose stones about, maybe. Yeah, you got to think of the terrain and the quality. Depending on the quality and the ground, the texture of it, when Noah is supposedly being dragged, is it rough enough to cause that to the fingertips, or would that be more so associated on a more established road, or where it's a bit more rocky and bumpy and there's more friction and more catching on the ground? Yeah. What else do we have? It's a long one, this. Casey mentioned, my mom and family don't get along. So Casey doesn't, I guess, get on well with her mom and family because of things in the past. That's what links and crosses over to the breakdown in communication within the case and how Casey is last to know about certain stuff and last in line to receive certain items of Noah, if you remember, like low in the pecking order. I think that's the correct way of wording it. Okay, so with that being said, I think that might be it personally. Just wanted to make sure I've got everything. We've done 3, we've done 4 and 5. Yeah. So I know that was long, but then again, I've done videos which are a bit longer than this, but this was done in one take. I'll probably hold on to those notes. Might do a map analysis at some point if it's really needed. We'll just see how things go and how it develops, but just from my personal opinion, because of the lack of coverage it's received. If some of this, if not all of it, has been mentioned at one point, it wasn't mentioned enough. The context and the source was not given, right? So if I knew about all this stuff in the earlier days and it was made crystal clear and it was consistent and the source was given as well, would I have been leaning more towards would I have been leaning more towards a form of foul play and murder? Well, technically, I was leaning towards that anyway in the earlier days. So put it this way instead. In the earlier days at the beginning, I was leaning towards murder, foul play. Then I learned it from a different side and perspective, and then there was resistance. So at the time of when being pulled in a different direction, as for just acknowledging the different possibilities, naturally speaking, I would have been pulled backwards in the original direction if I had learned about that at the time. Things still could have changed onwards, but you see how it goes. But it comes down to awareness. And that information and stuff I didn't hear of back then, and maybe some of it had never been mentioned before or made clear enough. Still, there are portions of what Casey says as an opinion, and that's all. So we have to be careful about that as for the wording, to take that in mind. But still, it's just interesting what's been said, and this late in, at least from my point of view, this late in, and that's what's being said. What happens next? I guess we'll see. I think Casey mentioned that they've hired an attorney as well to get things going for investigations and stuff when needed. But look, this interview was good. If it was done earlier on, would have been even better, in my opinion. But look, there's a time and place for everything. And under the circumstances with Casey and what they've been dealing with, maybe there's a certain time. Look, I still understand from opposite perspectives and other people with the counterpoints, you know? So all comments are welcome down below in the comment section. I was just simply sharing my reaction to what's been said here. See, just based on what's been said as a fact or an opinion, it speaks greater volume when it's said by someone within the case, such as a victim's family member, compared to a complete stranger online that just says, trust me, I've heard it from partygoers, I've heard it from this. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure there could still be twists and turns in the case and unexpected things. But in the meantime, it's like waiting and seeing. I just hope you enjoyed the video and it was okay in length. I just wanted to make sure it was all cleared up and clear and understandable. And yeah, I appreciate those that have watched and remain, and for your patience. My name's Wallite Raf. Thanks for watching. Goodbye and good night for now.